In the smoky industrial sprawl of Chicago, 1926, a bespectacled professor named James O. McKinsey laid the foundation for a firm that would become a global titan of influence and controversy. McKinsey Company began as a humble consultancy, offering accounting and management advice to factories grappling with the economic turbulence of the post-World War I era. James, a University of Chicago academic with a penchant for numbers, saw opportunity in the chaos of early 20th century capitalism. His pitch was simple yet seductive: clarity, efficiency, and profit for a world on the brink of the Great Depression. But beneath this pragmatic facade, McKinsey Company was a seedbed for a machine that would wield unparalleled power, often at the expense of ethics, accountability, and human lives. Over nearly a century, the firm would shape the world's most powerful institutions while leaving a trail of devastation, its legacy a chilling testament to the cost of unchecked ambition. McKinsey emerged in a gritty corner of Chicago's business district, a small office staffed by a handful of consultants armed with ledger books and a vision. James O. McKinsey, a former accountant and professor, brought an academic rigor to the firm, emphasizing data-driven solutions for struggling businesses. His early clients were local manufacturers and retailers, desperate for cost-cutting measures in an era of economic uncertainty. McKinsey's approach, rooted in scientific management principles pioneered by Frederick Taylor, promised to streamline operations and boost profits. Yet, even in these embryonic years, the firm's recommendations carried a harsh edge. Layoffs, wage reductions, and corner cutting were common prescriptions, prioritizing shareholder value over workers' livelihoods. James's ambition outstripped his health. In 1937, at age 48, he died of pneumonia, leaving the firm rudderless. His death marked a turning point, thrusting Marvin Bower, a Harvard-trained lawyer who joined in 1933, into the spotlight. Bower was a visionary with a ruthless streak, determined to transform McKinsey into a professional powerhouse. He modeled the firm on elite law firms, instilling a culture of exclusivity and secrecy. Consultants were to be the best and brightest, Ivy League graduates clad in tailored suits, bound by a code of confidentiality that shielded the firm's dealings from scrutiny. Bower's mantra was "client first." But in practice, it meant serving the powerful, no matter the cost. By the late 1930s, McKinsey was advising major corporations like U.S. Steel and Standard Oil, embedding itself in the arteries of American capitalism. The firm's early controversies were subtle but telling. Its advice to chemical manufacturers ignored workplace safety, contributing to accidents that maimed workers, while its cost-cutting for textile mills led to labor unrest. These were the first whispers of a pattern that would define McKinsey's legacy. World War II was a crucible for McKinsey's growth. The firm seized the opportunity to advise government agencies and defense contractors, streamlining supply chains and optimizing wartime production. Its work for the U.S. Army and companies like Boeing honed its expertise in large-scale organizational change, earning it a reputation for precision. But this era also exposed McKinsey's moral flexibility. Its recommendations for wartime manufacturers prioritized speed over safety, leading to factory accidents that killed workers, collateral damage in the firm's pursuit of efficiency. The post-war economic boom propelled McKinsey into a new stratosphere. As American corporations expanded, the firm became their trusted confidant, advising on mergers, acquisitions, and global strategies. By the 1950s, McKinsey's client list read like a who's who of corporate America: General Motors, IBM, Exxon, and AT&T. Marvin Bower's obsession with prestige drove the firm to reject smaller clients, focusing instead on titans of industry. This exclusivity came at a cost. McKinsey's advice to oil and chemical giants streamlined operations but ignored environmental consequences, contributing to pollution crises that would haunt communities for decades. Its work for Big Tobacco in the 1950s, advising on marketing strategies to boost cigarette sales, fueled addiction while the firm pocketed hefty fees. Bower's internal reform solidified McKinsey's elitist culture. The up or out system, where consultants either advanced to partner or were fired, created a Darwinian environment rewarding ambition over ethics. The firm's training program, dubbed the McKinsey University, indoctrinated young recruits with a sense of superiority, teaching them to view clients as puzzles to be solved, not people with stakes in their decisions. This culture bred loyalty to the firm's bottom line, a trait that would underpin its darkest controversies. The 1960s marked McKinsey's transformation into a global player. Under Bower's successor, Gilbert Klee, the firm opened offices in London, Paris, Tokyo, and Sydney, chasing the post-war globalization of business. McKinsey's international expansion was less about spreading enlightenment than securing new revenue streams. Its consultants, armed with standardized playbooks, advised European and Asian conglomerates, often imposing American business models with little regard for local contexts. In Japan, McKinsey's work with electronics firms like Sony streamlined production but clashed with traditional labor practices, sparking worker protests. In Europe, its advice to chemical companies like BASF prioritized profit over environmental regulations, contributing to pollution scandals. Back home, McKinsey's influence deepened. The firm advised on the conglomerate boom of the 1960s, helping companies like ITT and Gulf and Western diversify into sprawling empires. But many of these deals unraveled in the 1970s, costing shareholders billions and exposing McKinsey's overconfidence. The firm's creation of the McKinsey Quarterly in 1964, a glossy journal of thought leadership, was a masterstroke of branding, cloaking its self-interest in academic gravitas. Yet, this era also saw McKinsey's first major scandal. Its work for the Penn Central Railroad in the late 1960s, advising on cost-cutting and restructuring, failed to prevent the company's 1970 bankruptcy, the largest in U.S. history at the time. Thousands lost jobs and pensioners were wiped out. McKinsey deflected blame, claiming its advice was misimplemented, a tactic it would perfect in future controversies. Internally, the firm's culture grew more insular. Consultants were expected to live the McKinsey way, a lifestyle of relentless work, client worship, and personal sacrifice. The firm's secrecy deepened, with partners signing non-disclosure agreements that ensured internal missteps never saw daylight. This opacity shielded McKinsey from accountability, allowing it to navigate the turbulent 1970s, a decade of oil shocks and economic malaise, with its reputation intact. The 1980s were McKinsey's golden age, a decade of unchecked growth fueled by the deregulatory fervor of the Reagan era. The firm's revenue soared as it advised banks, airlines, and telecoms on exploiting new freedoms. With over 2,000 consultants and offices in 20 countries, McKinsey was the gold standard of management consulting, its name synonymous with prestige. But this era also exposed the firm's moral bankruptcy. Its work for Enron, the energy giant, began in the late 1980s, laying the groundwork for one of the biggest corporate scandals in history. McKinsey consultants helped Enron develop its aggressive trading strategies and off-balance sheet financing, which masked debt and inflated profits. When Enron collapsed in 2001, costing 20,000 jobs and $74 billion in shareholder value, McKinsey distanced itself, claiming it merely provided strategic advice. But the truth was damning. McKinsey's fingerprints were all over Enron's fraudulent schemes, a betrayal of trust that enriched the firm while ruining lives.
What day, Mr. Skilling, did you leave Enron?
August 14th.
August 14th. Sharon Watkins wrote a memo on August 14th to Ken Lay. She said, Skilling is resigning now for personal reasons, but I think he wasn't having fun. Looked down the road and knew this stuff was unfixable and would rather abandon ship now than resign in shame 2 years later. Wasn't Ms. Watkins really correct that you were abandoning ship on a day that you already knew, as she did, that this company had deep problems, that you had already identified them, and you were just walking away without warning investors, without warning employees, without telling everyone what the real reason was that you were quitting Enron?
Congressman, I can just say it again. On the date I left, I absolutely, unequivocally thought the company was in good shape.
Mr. Skilling, according to the Watkins memo, Mr. McMahon and Mr. McMahon's testimony and the Powers Committee report, Mr. McMahon approached you with serious concerns about the inherent conflicts of interest in LJM. Is that true?
The 1980s also saw the rise of McKinsey's alumni network, a web of influence that would amplify the firm's reach. The firm's rigorous hiring and training produced a cadre of ambitious leaders who carried McKinsey's ethos into the world's most powerful institutions. Sundar Pichai, a young Indian engineer, joined McKinsey in 2002 after an MBA from Wharton, but his time at the firm in the early 2000s reflected its mold. Analytical, ambitious, and attuned to power. Pichai's brief stint equipped him with the strategic toolkit to climb Google's ranks, becoming CEO of Alphabet in 2015. His leadership at Google, marked by monopolistic practices, tax avoidance, and data privacy scandals, bears the hallmarks of McKinsey's profit-first mentality. Similarly, Sheryl Sandberg, who joined McKinsey in the 1990s post-Harvard MBA, honed her ability to navigate corporate power structures. As Facebook's COO from 2008 to 2022, Sandberg turned the platform into an advertising juggernaut. But her tenure was marred by controversies over misinformation, the Cambridge Analytica scandal, and Facebook's role in societal polarization. McKinsey's alumni didn't just succeed, they shaped a world where profit trumped principle, a legacy the firm quietly celebrated. Other alumni like Susan Rice, former U.S. National Security Advisor, and Louis Gerstner, former IBM CEO, carried McKinsey's detached, data-driven approach into government and industry, often prioritizing efficiency over empathy. 1990s cemented McKinsey's status as a global colossus. With over 5,000 consultants and offices in 40 countries, the firm was advising governments, multinationals, and even nonprofits. Its work in emerging markets like India, Brazil, and China showcased its adaptability, but also its opportunism. In India, McKinsey arrived in 1992, riding the wave of economic liberalization. The firm advised conglomerates like Reliance Industries and Tata Group, streamlining operations and boosting profits. But its recommendations often ignored India's social fabric. Factory closures and labor cuts sparked protests in cities like Mumbai, while McKinsey's exorbitant fees drained local economies. In Brazil, McKinsey's work with state-owned enterprises like Petrobras in the late 1990s optimized operations but turned a blind eye to corruption, later exposed in the Lava Jato scandal that rocked the country. In China, McKinsey advised state-owned enterprises and multinationals, helping Beijing integrate into the global economy.
To the witnesses for being here. Mr. Sternfels, if I could just start with you. Did I hear you say in your opening statement, I'm going to quote you now, we have the industry's most rigorous client selection policy? Did I get that right?
We believe that to be true, Senator.
Well, How is it then that you end up with so many clients who are state-owned Chinese corporations hostile to the United States?
Thank you, Senator. So the basis for my answer was we've invested over $700 million over the last several years to put in place a rigorous client selection process that looks at a whole series of factors.
Well, let's talk about some of your clients. Like the China Communications Construction Company. This is a firm that is blacklisted by the United States government. This is a state-owned enterprise that is responsible for building artificial islands in the South China Sea, probably in direct contravention of international law, certainly in direct contravention to United States security interests. You helped them develop their 5-year plan. Why is that a good idea? Why did you advise on 22 of the 100 biggest Chinese state-owned enterprises?
That number I don't believe is accurate, Senator.
It doesn't have anything to do with money, does it?
I don't believe that number is accurate, Senator.
How much money do you make off the United States government?
I don't know the size of our work with the U.S. government, Senator.
In 2021, you made more than $850 million in consulting work for the federal government with the Department of Defense as your top client. When you bid for those government contracts, did you disclose your work for these Chinese state-owned enterprises that were conducting activity adverse to our national security? Did you disclose it to the Department of Defense?
But its work propped up authoritarian structures, enabling surveillance-heavy smart city projects that eroded civil liberties. McKinsey's global perspective was less about cultural sensitivity than imposing Western business models, often at the expense of local communities and democratic values. McKinsey's pro bono work expanded in this decade, a calculated move to polish its tarnished image. The firm took on projects for nonprofits, governments, and international organizations, touting its commitment to social impact. A case study from the 1990s illustrates the scale and sincerity, or lack thereof, of these efforts. McKinsey partnered with a global health NGO to improve vaccine distribution in sub-Saharan Africa, a region ravaged by disease and poverty. The project was ambitious. Dozens of consultants worked pro bono for 6 months, delivering a 200-page report on supply chain efficiencies, cold storage solutions, and last-mile delivery. On paper, it was a noble endeavor, celebrated in McKinsey's annual reports as proof of its altruism, but the reality was sobering. The recommendations were impractical for resource-strapped countries like Uganda and Malawi, requiring infrastructure, refrigerated trucks, reliable electricity that didn't exist. The NGO, underfunded and overstretched, struggled to implement the plan, and the project fizzled within a year. Meanwhile, McKinsey reaped PR benefits, showcasing the work in glossy brochures while quietly billing other clients for similar expertise. This pattern, grand promises, shallow execution, defined McKinsey's pro bono efforts, a veneer of goodwill masking self-interest. Other pro bono projects, like advising on urban renewal in Falls, followed a similar script: bold proposals, minimal follow-through, and maximum publicity. The new millennium brought McKinsey's darkest hour. The Enron scandal of 2001 was just the beginning of a decade defined by ethical lapses and public outrage. The firm's work for Big Tobacco in the 1990s and 2000s, advising companies like Philip Morris on marketing strategies to target youth and downplay health risks, fueled addiction, while McKinsey simultaneously advised healthcare providers on smoking-related costs. This hypocrisy reached a nadir with the opioid crisis. From the early 2000s, McKinsey advised Purdue Pharma, the maker of OxyContin, on how to turbocharge sales. Consultants devised tactics to target high-prescribing doctors, circumvent FDA warnings, and maximize profits, even as addiction rates soared.
McKinsey advised Purdue how to avoid FDA and pharmacy restrictions because McKinsey knew that people were overdosing and dying and getting sick.
The result was catastrophic. Over 500,000 deaths and millions addicted by 2020. When the truth emerged in the 2010s, McKinsey paid $573 million in settlements in 2021, and a former partner pleaded guilty to obstructing justice by destroying records. Yet the firm never admitted wrongdoing, hiding behind its client confidentiality mantra, a shield it wielded with chilling precision.
Now to the agreement between federal prosecutors and the global giant McKinsey Company, the firm agreeing to pay hundreds of millions of dollars for its role in the opioid epidemic. ABC's Perry Russum joins us from Washington with those details. Perry, good morning to you.
Janae, good morning to you. With this deal, McKinsey & Company will pay $650 million to settle a federal investigation into their work tied to the opioid epidemic. McKinsey is an international consulting firm. They were being investigated for their role in helping Purdue Pharma sell OxyContin and other painkillers fueling the drug crisis. The CDC has linked opioids to the deaths of more than 80,000 people just last year. Federal investigators say McKinsey worked with Purdue Pharma to turbocharge their sales. At the time, there was concern among doctors OxyContin was being abused, so Purdue's sales went down. Prosecutors say McKinsey advised Purdue to target sales to high-volume prescribers, including those who are prescribing the drugs for reasons that were unsafe and medically unnecessary. That often led to drug abuse and addiction. The FBI says McKinsey would even do ride-alongs with Purdue so they could get even more scripts written.
McKinsey's work in authoritarian regimes further blackened its reputation. In the 2000s, the firm advised Saudi Arabia's government, producing a 2015 report that identified online critics of the regime, some of whom were later imprisoned or tortured. In South Africa, McKinsey's $700 million contract with Eskom, the state-owned utility, in the 2010s enabled corruption tied to the Gupta family, contributing to President Jacob Zuma's downfall. The firm repaid fees but avoided criminal liability, its global influence shielding it from lasting consequences. In Russia, McKinsey advised state-owned enterprises like Gazprom, bolstering Vladimir Putin's economic machine while preaching democracy elsewhere. These weren't isolated missteps, but a business model. McKinsey served power regardless of its moral hue. The alumni network continued to grow, embedding McKinsey's ethos in global power structures. Beyond Pichai and Sandberg, figures like Pete Buttigieg, U.S. Transportation Secretary, and Tom Cotton, U.S. Senator, carried McKinsey's analytical detachment into politics, often prioritizing corporate interests over public welfare. Buttigieg's time at McKinsey in the 2000s, advising clients like Blue Cross Blue Shield, taught him to frame profit-driven decisions as efficiencies, a skill he applied to transportation policy with mixed results. Cotton, a McKinsey consultant in the 2000s, brought the firm's data-driven pragmatism to the Senate, advocating hawkish policies that aligned with defense contractors, many of whom McKinsey advised. The network's strength lay in its exclusivity. Alumni maintained close ties through private events, WhatsApp groups, and boardroom connections, leveraging these for investments, policy influence, and personal gain. This web of power ensured McKinsey's reach extended far beyond its offices, a shadow government operating in plain sight. As public scrutiny intensified, McKinsey doubled down on image management. The 2010s saw the firm tout its sustainability credentials, advising clients on net zero goals and publishing reports on climate change. Yet it simultaneously served 43 of the world's top 100 carbon polluters, including coal giants like BHP and oil behemoths like Saudi Aramco, earning billions while preaching green. This hypocrisy was no accident. McKinsey's business model thrived on conflicts of interest. The firm advised regulators and the companies they oversaw, sharing insights across clients despite denials. Its work for the FDA while advising Purdue Pharma raised eyebrows, as did its simultaneous contracts with rival tech giants like Apple and Microsoft. McKinsey's Chinese walls, internal barriers meant to prevent conflicts, were paper thin, a facade to appease critics. The firm's cost-cutting recommendations grew more reckless. At U.S. Steel, McKinsey's advice in the 2010s slashed maintenance budgets, leading to a 2018 explosion that injured workers. At Disneyland, its efficiency drives reduced staff, causing safety lapses and guest complaints. Most disturbingly, McKinsey advised U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, in 2018, proposing cuts to detainee food and medical care to accelerate deportations. When internal dissent leaked, McKinsey claimed it was horrified by its own work, a hollow apology that fooled no one. In emerging markets, McKinsey's influence grew more insidious. In India, the firm advised on smart cities initiatives promising urban transformation. But projects like Gurugram's Cyber City favored corporate developers, displacing thousands of poor residents and creating gated enclaves for the elite. In Brazil, McKinsey's work with agribusiness giants like JBS fueled Amazon deforestation, contradicting its sustainability rhetoric. In Nigeria, McKinsey's advice to privatize state assets in the 2010s enriched local oligarchs while raising energy costs for citizens. The firm's global perspective was a one-size-fits-all playbook, blind to local nuances and human costs. As of May 2025, McKinsey remains a juggernaut with 45,000 employees, 130 offices, and $15 billion in annual revenue. The firm has weathered scandals by leveraging its prestige and alumni network. The opioid settlement in South Africa debacle prompted reforms, tighter client vetting, mandatory ethics training, and a values-driven rebrand. But these feel like window dressing. McKinsey continues to serve controversial clients, from fossil fuel giants like ExxonMobil to authoritarian governments like the UAE, while touting AI and digital transformation as its new frontier. Its AI division, Quantum Black, advises on predictive policing and surveillance, raising privacy concerns in countries like India and Brazil. The firm's pro bono work persists, but projects like advising on refugee resettlement in Europe or disaster recovery in Haiti often yield glossy reports with little real-world impact, serving more as PR than progress. A 2022 project for a Caribbean nation hit by hurricanes, for instance, proposed a resilient infrastructure plan that ignored local expertise and collapsed due to funding gaps, leaving communities worse off. McKinsey's internal culture remains toxic. The firm's always-on work environment, 80-hour weeks, constant travel, and relentless pressure has driven mental health crises among consultants. A 2023 internal survey leaked to the press revealed 40% of junior staff reported burnout, yet leadership dismissed it as part of the McKinsey experience. The firm's diversity push, launched in 2020 amid Black Lives Matter protests, has faltered. Black and Hispanic partners remain under 5% of leadership, despite public pledges. McKinsey's commitment to change is as shallow as its pro bono work, a performance for external audiences. McKinsey's competitors, Boston Consulting Group, BCG, and Bain & Company, form the big three of consulting, but their ethical records are hardly pristine. BCG, with 30,000 employees and a focus on innovation, has faced criticism for advising fossil fuel companies like Chevron and governments with poor human rights records, such as Kazakhstan. Its 2019 work for Angola's state oil company, Sonangol, propped up a kleptocratic regime. Though the scandal garnered less attention than McKinsey's missteps, BCG's social impact practice, advising NGOs like the Gates Foundation, mirrors McKinsey's pro bono playbook, high profile but often impractical. Bain, smaller at 15,000 employees, has worked with private equity firms to strip assets from struggling companies, contributing to bankruptcies like Toys R Us, which cost 33,000 jobs. Bain's ties to Bain Capital, its private equity spin-off, have drawn scrutiny for predatory practices such as loading companies with debt while executives cashed out. A 2021 expose revealed Bain's role in gutting a UK retailer, Debenhams, leaving pensioners stranded. Yet neither BCG nor Bain matches McKinsey's scale of controversy. McKinsey's work with Enron, Purdue Pharma, Saudi Arabia, and South Africa sets it apart as the industry's ethical pariah. BCG and Bain have avoided equivalent scandals, partly due to their smaller footprints and less aggressive client pursuits. All three firms share a profit-driven DNA, prioritizing billable hours over societal good, but McKinsey's unmatched influence, its alumni in C-suites and cabinets, its role in global crises, amplifies its sins. If BCG and Bain are accomplices, McKinsey is the mastermind, its shadow looming larger than any rival. McKinsey & Company is a paradox, a beacon of intellect and a harbinger of harm. For nearly a century, it has shaped the world's most powerful institutions, from corporations to governments, while leaving a trail of devastation. Its alumni like Pichai, Sandberg, Buttigieg, and Cotton wield McKinsey's strategic playbook to dominate industries and policies, often at society's expense. Its pro bono work, though vast in scale, is a hollow gesture, more about optics than impact. In emerging markets, McKinsey's global perspective extracts wealth while cloaking itself in progress. Compared to BCG and Bain, McKinsey's ethical failures are unmatched, a testament to its hubris and reach. As the firm marches into its second century, it remains a shadow force, untouchable, unapologetic, and unrelenting in its pursuit of power. The world it has shaped is richer for some, poorer for most, and forever scarred by the cost of its counsel.